This week on Mob Talk Radio on Location, we're on the Lower East Side of Manhattan in New York City. I'm Jeff Canorsi from Mob Talk Radio, and I've been in the mob genre a decade now. I've seen it all, heard it all, and been through it all. I'm not just your host, but I call some of the most infamous names you've heard of my friends, and that's what separates me from the rest. Part history, part streets. Come along with me for a one-of-a-kind trip we call Mob Talk Radio on Location. This week on Mob Talk Radio, we're talking Lucky Luciano, so grab your coat, grab your hat, and tag along. Salvatore Luciano would arrive in American shores at age 8 from Sicily. In tow with Luciano was his father Antonio, his mother Rosalia, along with his brothers Giuseppe, Bartolomeo, his sister Filippa, and his other sister Concetta. They would settle in the slums of the Lower East Side of Manhattan at 265 East 10th Street. The Lucanias would settle in one of the tenement districts on the Lower East Side in the 10th Ward, which 1,100 people lived per acre, in crowded slums which covered as much as 80% of the lot in the blocks, making it the most crowded block in the world. We are standing outside of Lucky Luciano's home, 265 East 10th Street. Luciano would find school tough and eventually would start skipping. It would lead to his father beating him nonstop and eventually would lead to the Board of Education sentencing Luciano to 4 months in truancy school in 1911. After 4 months, Luciano would get out and get a job delivering hats for the Goodman Hat Company. Days after getting the job, he would spot the local drug dealer parked outside of the next building over. Luciano raced over and began to shine his limousine. The dealer would toss Luciano a quarter, who tossed it back and suggested that he should start delivering drugs for him instead. It wouldn't last long, as Luciano would get caught in 1916 with a vial of heroin and would be sent then to reform school for 8 months. When Lucky returned home, his father would find a gold belt hidden in Lucky's closet, and Lucky's father would beat him senseless. And that was the day that Lucky Luciano left and never looked back. His criminal career had begun. We are on 82nd Avenue. Joe the Boss Masseria actually lived here. At one time, Joe Masseria wanted complete control of the Mafia and had serious issues with Salvatore Toto D'Aquila, who wanted Joe Masseria dead. It was basically an old-fashioned war brewing between two mustache Petes. Toto would dispatch his number one hitter, Umberto Valenti, to take care of that job. On August 9th of 1922, Joe Masseria is leaving his house, and just a few hundred feet over is a blue sedan. 2 men inside the blue sedan get out and pull out .45 caliber weapons. As Masseria steps out, they open fire. Masseria would flee on foot to 82nd Avenue and somehow would survive. But war was on. Within hours, Joe the Boss Masseria summons a spry 25-year-old Lucky Luciano. We are standing outside Johnny's, and this place is famous for a lot of things. But it's a murder which makes it infamous. August 11th of 1922, just a mere 2 days after Umberto Valenti tried to kill Joe Masseria. Lucky Luciano and Vito Genovese are lying in wait for Valenti. Valenti was a hitter himself, having committed over 20 murders, and he should have been more self-aware. At noon, Valenti and 6 of his friends emerged from the entrance. They would begin to walk eastward. As they engaged in conversation, Lucky Luciano and Vito Genovese stalked right up to them, pulling out .32s and firing. Valenti was dead on the spot, and Luciano had made his bones for Masseria. We are at 80 St. Mark Street, which is also the William Barnacle Tavern. The William Barnacle Tavern opened in the 1830s, and during Prohibition times, it was used specifically as an illegal nightclub and a bootlegging spot by none other than Lucky Luciano. Down in the basement are illegal smuggling tunnels, booby-trapped rooms, and various escape tunnels. This location is just a couple of blocks over from another location where Luciano ran his business. As Luciano committed his first sanctioned murder for Joe Masseria, at the same time, the United States was under the demonology of alcohol. When the Volstead Act came into fruition, alcohol would be banned except for medicinal purposes. Luciano, with Masseria's blessing, went into the bootlegging business with Frank Costello, Vito Genovese, and all three were under the tutelage of Arnold the Brain Rothstein. It would be through Rothstein that Luciano, Genovese, and Costello would acquire the funding to begin their own bootlegging operations, and the money began to pour in, and this very tavern became Luciano's main hub for pushing alcohol to consumers. With the cavalcade of money pouring in, Luciano would move into underground casinos. He would also move from 10th Street to 14th Street. While we might know him as Lucky, those in the streets would know him as Lucky from 14th Street. We are at 85 East 4th Street, which was known as the Palm Casino in the mid-1920s. This was the former headquarters of Lucky Luciano. So as Luciano was making six figures in a relatively short period of time with Genovese, Costello, and others, both Meyer, Lansky, and Bugsy, Siegel, and Joe Kennedy would join the fold as partners in the bootlegging operations. Luciano wanted to establish an underground gambling facility, and he did so here at the Palm Casino. Inside was a speakeasy, gambling tables, and it became the one-stop shop for booze, broads, and gambling. Most nights you could find the who's who of organized crime in the place, including Albert Anastasia, Tommy Lucchese, Louis Lepke Buckhalter, Dutch Schultz, Bugsy Siegel, Meyer Lansky, Vito Genovese, and Frank Costello were there almost every night. While it was the headquarters of Luciano for a short period of time, it became in reality the first mob social club in the city. Even though this is prior to the Castellammarese War, it just shows how Luciano was diversifying his life on the streets. While Masseria sat enclosed in his own home, much like Maranzano did, Lucky was out and about turning a dollar at every turn. The Palm Casino is alleged to have been the meeting place for Luciano and a dissident faction of the Maranzano crime family prior to the Castellammarese War. This is the meeting where everyone on both sides agreed that both Maranzano and Masseria had to go, and that's exactly what would happen to both men. And as we know, Lucky Luciano would take control of the Mafia in 1931 after those assassinations of Maranzano and Joe Masseria. We are at 196 First Avenue, and this is one of the most integral parts of Lucky Luciano's life. People walking by would never know that back in the heyday, this was the very spot where Lucky Luciano, along with others, established the heroin trade. This very spot was owned by Santos Sorge and was the headquarters for heroin distribution. Santos Sorge came to New York City sometime between 1951 and 1952. Luciano had known Sorge back in Italy, and Sorge coming to New York was no accident. Sorge would establish himself quickly in Manhattan and would use this very storefront to store heroin and to ensure that it was distributed throughout the city. Before the heroin trade would completely take off, Santos Sorge would travel back to Italy on October 12th through the 16th to Palermo, along with Joe Bonanno, Lucky Luciano, John Bonaventure, Frank Garofalo, and Carmine Galante. They would end up meeting with Salvatore Greco, Giuseppe Genco Russo, Angelo La Barbara, Gaetano Badalamenti, Calcedonio de Pisa, Toto Minore, and Tommaso Buscetta. One of the hidden partners in this, who are not in attendance, would be Frank Costello and the one and only Joe Kennedy. Santos Sorge specifically was the middleman between Sicilian Cosa Nostra and American Cosa Nostra. Santos Sorge had all the contacts in Corsica as well as contacts in the Middle East. Santos Sorge was the guy who brought everybody together. This meeting we know as the Heroin Summit. What Luciano wanted was to establish routes from the Mideast to the United States. What Luciano wanted was the poppies to be transformed into opium paste, then shipped to laboratories that the Mafia controlled to manufacture the heroin. This meeting would establish those routes which traffickers still use today. Sorge's headquarters here in Manhattan would be the shipping point for other crime families. Up until this point, Luciano had been nickel and diming low-grade heroin, but now he would control the market, and it was a game changer for American Cosa Nostra. While routes were established, they needed a friend, someone who could ensure that American waters would be cleared for ships to deliver the product. Luciano went back to an old friend through Frank Costello for help, and that man would be Joseph Kennedy. Kennedy would supply ships just as he had always done during Prohibition. The fact that Joe Kennedy controlled the Coast Guard for the most part and had access to ships, it would enable Costello to cloak ships, painting them to look like American Coast Guard ships, and that would enable safe and unobscured passage through American waters. For Cosa Nostra and Lucky Luciano, they would become millionaires overnight and never look back. June 16th of 1936, Lucky Luciano would be arrested for pandering. He would receive a 30 to 50-year prison sentence. While in prison, he would allow Vito Genovese to handle the street side of business. However, in 1937, after catching wind of a warrant for his arrest for murder, Genovese would flee to Italy, leaving nobody to take control of the crime family. Luciano would elevate Frank Costello to be the new boss of the Luciano crime family. In 1942, as World War II was ratcheting up, one of the major concerns was U.S. naval ports, and the military and the government knew that the mob controlled the docks. The military would approach Meyer Lansky with an offer. If Lucky Luciano would promise to keep the docks safe from Nazi sabotage, they would commute his sentence. Luciano was on board and agreed. Luciano would provide intel to the military about Sicily and mob contacts there who could help them as well. Luciano thought he served his country and expected to hit the streets. But the problem was Thomas Dewey, the prosecutor, who hated Luciano with a passion, was not going to fulfill any agreement that was made. In fact, Luciano would get out, but he would be deported back to Italy immediately in 1946. Not long after being deported, Luciano arranged for a meeting to take place in Havana, Cuba, where he summoned all mafia leadership. That meeting specifically was to ensure it was all systems go, and to establish Havana as not just a gambling mecca and a place they could control, but also a point of distribution for drugs. At this meeting, Vito Genovese, who had returned to the United States, wanted control of the Luciano family. In a private meeting with Lucky Luciano and Frank Costello, he asks Luciano to step down, calling him old and out of touch. Luciano's reaction was to almost beat Vito Genovese to death. The beating was so severe it took a week before Genovese could walk to even leave Cuba. Costello was Luciano's man, and Genovese just had to accept it. But as history tells us, however, he wouldn't, because he would wound up telling American authorities that Luciano was actually in Cuba. At the time, Cuba was relying on American goods and medicine, and the United States, upon finding out that Luciano was 90 miles from American shores, threatened to stop giving Cuba aid. That move forced Cuban authorities to deport Luciano from Cuba, and that basically rendered Lucky Luciano powerless. Also on the agenda was the problem with Bugsy Siegel at that meeting, who had been stealing from the Mafia out in Las Vegas. And Luciano was fed up and would order his death. Months after the Palermo Summit in 1957, state police would raid the home of Joe Barbara, arresting 60 made members of the Mafia, the who's who of the commission. This meeting was to establish Vito Genovese as the head of the Mafia after taking out Albert Anastasia and attempting to kill Frank Costello without the approval from the commission. Even though Luciano had already been extradited back to Italy, and was still trying in vain to keep a firm grip on Cosa Nostra from Italy, he was just failing to do so. That meeting in upstate New York had many items on its agenda, and narcotics was a major discussion point. As Luciano would take the point position in Naples, the problem was any power that Luciano thought he could exert was pretty much over. Eventually, the mob would lose control and millions upon millions of dollars in Cuba when Fidel Castro overthrows Batista, and the mob's central point for distribution hub and gambling mecca was over. For Luciano, the glory days were slowly coming to an end. However, in a last-ditch effort to show Genovese who the real power was, he would use Carlo Gambino to set up Vito Genovese for a bad narcotics pinch in 1959. It's through Frank Costello that Lucky Luciano ordered that Genovese be set up. Carlo Gambino would be contacted by Frank Costello, who was handed 6 figures to pay off a known drug dealer by the name of Nelson Cantaloupes. Gambino would pay Cantaloupes, Genovese gets set up, then he gets arrested and sentenced to prison for 15 years. He would never see daylight again, as he would die in prison in 1969. Luciano never forgot what Genovese did to him. While Luciano would invest his time in narcotics trade in Italy, he truly didn't have any more say in American Cosa Nostra. Luciano, the last few years, would be harassed nonstop by Italian authorities looking into the narcotics trafficking, and it never ended for Luciano. Wherever he went, they followed. While in the airport in 1962, he would suffer a heart attack and die. His body would be flown back to New York, and he would be buried at St. John's Cemetery in Queens in a lavish funeral. Lucky Luciano was a visionary. He was the godfather of American Cosa Nostra. Very few mobsters' names and reputations will last the test of time, but he is one of those men. Long after we are all gone, the name Luciano will still resonate in the city that never sleeps. Men like Luciano, they are a dying breed. History will say whatever they want about Luciano and men like him. However, very few can say that they built a city. Very few can stand up and say, "So too shall my soul burn like this saint, if I betray my friends, and truly carry through with it." Join us next time on Mob Talk Radio on Location.